Hey there, Mr. Terry here, high school history teacher. Welcome back to another History Teacher X video. All right, people love great man history, but is there such a thing as great death history? Let's see if that's the case with Kelevin's newest video called How Every Great Conqueror Died. By the way, if you missed it, Kelevin was on a show of History Showdown, my history trivia game show, and he was on with Chat History and Trust Me Bro, and we had a great time. I'm going to link that show down below. All right, this video is going to be linked down below. Please support that. Let's get Kelevin some more subs. And let's get started. All right, this is my great conqueror uniform. I'm both a king, but also like in the 1700s fighting. So I'm just a mix of all the eras. All right, I'm wondering if he's going to choose conquerors based on like interesting ways they died, or just go through the famous ones. And then maybe some of the deaths will, not be so exciting, especially matching their life.
Attila the Hun. After spending his life causing fear and
actually don't know how he died.
Cities and earning the name Scourge of God, you'd expect his end to include a big fight, a bold assassination, or at least something that
Christians were like, he's the devil.
The most feared men ever. Nah, not for Attila the Hun. First, a smidge of backstory. Attila was born in 406 CE, and he grew up with the Huns, a group that moved around a lot. They were famous for their great riding skills, scary attacks, and a mindset of taking what they wanted. When he became the leader of the Huns, he took whatever he wanted and left a trail of destruction and chaos. He didn't just take over cities, he controlled whole empires.
Yeah, it's like ancient Genghis Khan, isn't it? Nomadic, just take what you want, be seen as the devil by Christians and theists alike.
Attila couldn't be stopped, and the dude knew it. By 453 CE, he was at the height of his power. The Huns were in charge of Europe, and Attila thought it was time to party. His definition of a good time? Yet another wedding. Did I mention he had collected quite a few wives? I guess adding one more wouldn't hurt. This time, his wife was a young lady named Ildiko. It's unclear if she was excited about marrying Attila, but the wedding took place.
I don't know a lot about his personal life.
The night turned out quite differently than anyone thought.
Why?
After a day of eating and drinking a lot, he went to his room with Ildiko. The following morning, his helpers found his dead body. Now, what was the actual cause of death? There have been
poison, assassinated by his new wife. I'm calling it. You don't want to be the one wife among the 100 wives, okay? You got to be the top wife.
A few theories thrown around. One common story is that Attila drank a lot, had a big nosebleed while sleeping, choked on his blood, and passed away. Yep, the Scourge of God died choking on his own blood. Others suggest it may have been an assassination, with Ildiko possibly involved. Did she make him sick or kill him? We might
be precedent for that.
But the thought that Attila died because his nose couldn't take the wedding night is just too silly for the Scourge of Death.
I kind of agree. I mean, we have mechanisms that help us if we fall asleep and can choke. I mean, you got to be completely non-functional with brain activity, and with just like a bloody nose, that's different than other ways. I guess you could drown, because that's essentially what he's saying. So again, I don't know, but yeah, that does seem a little sus.
The results were just as intense as you would imagine from Attila's group. His followers, heartbroken by his death, held a big funeral with a feast. They put him in a coffin made of gold, silver, and iron, because that's just how he rolls. Then they killed the people who buried him to keep the place hidden.
Oh, they did that? Okay, I've heard that multiple times in history. The first emperor of China, Shi Huangdi, it said that happened as well. That those, like either buried people with him that knew about its location, even though it was kind of well known, but some of the craftsmen or people that knew like the secrets of it, that was probably more the thing, because he had this giant pyramid temple. So it's not about necessarily knowing its location, but the secrets inside, having that killed. And then actually with Genghis Khan, that is said to have happened as well, because we actually don't know where he is buried, but there is a story out there that, they had some tomb built, and the people that built it people ordered to have the people that knew about it killed. And I think I've even heard of it that the people that ordered them to kill him were also killed. And I also heard about them diverting a river potentially over the tomb so that it also could be hard to excavate and find. So I don't know. Those stories are so interesting, though.
Clearly had a lot of trust issues.
Yeah.
All right. Let me tell you a little something about Emperor Qin Shi Huang.
Oh, okay. There he is. This is him that I was talking about.
Born in 259 BCE as
first emperor of China.
This guy was leading kingdoms while many of us were just trying to get through math class. When he turned 13, he became the king of Qin, one of several fighting states.
So it was,
through math class.
I'll show you.
When he turned 13, he became the king of Qin.
Yeah, so Qin, okay, it's the Qin dynasty. That's what he's named after. It's his family name. This is after he conquers China. They were up in the northwest. They were a much smaller province. This is at a time where there were a lot of different states fighting each other, and you actually had famously the Warring States period kind of before this, and he basically conquered the others and then unified China. That's why he's known as the first emperor of China, by consolidating all these different kingdoms. But yeah, he was up in the northwest, and then was one that ordered the beginnings of the Great Wall of China. It was all mud and kind of wood back then, but you can see on the map there they kind of have that. But and even then there was a lot of fortifications, but he kind of unified them. But actually, the Great Wall that we look at today is much more a product of like the Ming Dynasty, which is going to be around the 1500s, with more of its stone and better fortifications than it was back then. But that was something an idea he kind of created, was creating a northern border for all of China.
One of several fighting states in China. Back then, China was, well, really chaotic. Just a lot of kingdoms battling to see who.
Okay, there we go. Yep.
He spent many years winning over other states, defeating them one by one. It
is interesting because the more luxurious, I guess you would say, parts of China are much more on the eastern coast, because that's where you have you have the headwaters of a lot of these rivers, but yeah, where the most fertile areas are. So kind of being on the outside of the major population areas of China, him coming in as kind of an outsider is another interesting one.
Was not
talking too much.
By 221 BCE, for the first time ever, all of China came together under one person.
Yeah.
Him.
Didn't look like this, though. They didn't go nearly this far west. The Tang Dynasty, which is going to come later, about, another 700 years or so later, actually even more that, really expanded it west into those areas.
Time ever, all of China came together under one person. Him.
Yeah.
Of course.
Didn't last long,
he got
though.
rid of all his brothers and sisters just to keep his crown safe.
Mm-hmm.
And if his paranoia wasn't dramatic enough, evidence from the terracotta army pits, like a head with an arrow chilling in the back, seemed to support the theory.
So the terracotta warriors are so fascinating because no two are alike. You can actually look at them even in this picture right here, because there's hundreds of these, and which has led some archaeologists to believe that these were potentially modeled after real elite guards of his. Because again, no two are alike. Really, really cool. But yeah, these are stationed outside of his tomb, and they were not found until a few decades ago. But one of the greatest archaeological achievements ever. But all right, this story is really good. I'm hoping, because I'm really fascinated, I'll add anything he doesn't cover.
Forget sharing toys. This man wasn't even sharing the throne. Once Qin Shi Huang secured control of the empire, he had zero chill.
Yeah, he was
a full-on control freak.
He was pretty brutal.
Act as emperor, standardize everything. Money, weights, measurements, and...
I mean, that makes sense because he had unified all these different states and he wanted a uniform weights and measures. So, okay, this is the money we're going to use, unifying language things. I mean, that kind of makes sense for an efficiency standpoint.
And cartwheel sizes. Standardize everything. Money, weights, measurements, and cartwheel sizes. Yep, because he believed if everything fits together, I can manage it more easily.
It's like mass production.
He also started construction projects. Big construction
interchangeable
projects.
Parts. The wall.
Like the Great Wall of China big.
Yeah.
Which back then was more like a pretty good wall, I guess. He also built roads.
The wall was also basically built with slave labor. It's estimated probably like 250,000 people probably died. I not 100% sure on that stat. I got to go back to the numbers, but yeah, an insane amount of people died, maybe a couple 100,000. And interestingly, what they did was they would put the dead bodies into the foundations of the wall itself. So it gave it another name you might have heard before, called the Long Graveyard. But yeah, basically coerced peasant labor. Huge percentage of the population of China was ordered to work on the wall at some time.
Canals, making ancient China operate more smoothly.
This is actually really important.
Yes. He also built roads and canals, making ancient China operate more smoothly. And then there was his grave. Yep, the man built his own grave.
They can talk about what killed him, though?
Many people are okay with a normal grave and maybe a nice headstone. Not the first emperor of China.
He started planning it as a child.
He had an entire hidden city built for the express purpose of serving as his final resting place. complete with rivers of mercury,
Yep.
which is a strange choice. Traps, because he was a bit paranoid.
So mercury, they thought, and he and his chemists and people thought that it had a magical quality to it. I don't know if he's going to get to it. It looks like he's just talking about the tomb there, but he actually had been ingesting mercury tablets given from his like doctor chemist wizards that they thought would extend his life. And in fact, if you don't know about mercury, it's actually very poisonous and it deteriorated his brain. He ended up dying, I think, in his 50s. And over time, with the ingestion of this stuff, he became crazier because his brain was being destroyed. Yeah, he died trying to become immortal. And yes, his tomb that they're talking about, he actually started planning that pretty much in his childhood because he became, if I remember right, he became king of the Qin, I think in his teenage years, but even back then he was already designing his tomb. That's kind of creepy to be thinking about your own, death that young.
And the Terracotta Army, thousands of life-size clay soldiers. Dude was really, really scared of dying, I guess. He conquered all of China, built the Great Wall, and made a lasting mark in history. But the idea of not being there to enjoy it really scared him. He wanted to live forever.
Okay,
he brought
I think he's going to get to it.
Magicians, and just about anyone who claimed that they could help him live forever. They told him, oh, there's this special element that can make you live forever. And it turns out that it was mercury.
Yep.
The really toxic element that will not help you live forever.
Yep.
Back then.
But it's beautiful, but you just don't want to ingest it. Now, the mercury in the tomb was actually used to make rivers. Where he was buried in his tomb, the legend of it, because we have not excavated it. Chinese government is very protective of it. It's very fragile. They know the location, though. But is supposed the legend says that he was put in basically like a bronze sarcophagus because they were really into bronze working then, and his sarcophagus was laid on a miniature map of China, of his empire, made with like the mountains and the rivers, the major rivers of China, and the mercury was supposed to serve as those rivers because it would be very beautiful.
Then folks believed it was something magical.
Yep.
And since Qin Shi Huang's mom didn't raise a coward, he went full commit. He began popping mercury pills like candy, believing he had found the secret to living forever. And in 210 BCE, during one of his journeys, Qin Shi Huang's quest for immortality went wrong in a major way. The mercury pills he took to stay alive forever ended up causing his death. But wait, it gets even
better.
Destroyed
his brain.
His helpers, worried that people would find out he had passed away, put his body in a carriage full of smelly fish to cover up the smell.
I did not know that.
The first emperor of China, the man who wanted everything to be perfect, spent his very first days of the afterlife relaxing next to a pile of dead fish.
What?
Very sad.
I hadn't heard that part.
Also, hey, subscribe. Just do it. Just subscribe. Okay, thank you.
I agree.
That brings us to our next guy, Alexander the Great.
Okay.
He wasn't just any king. He was the king. The one who believed that ruling one empire wasn't enough and chose to conquer the known world while many of us were still trying to understand taxes.
A lot of hypotheses about his death.
Full of amazing military successes and famous victories.
Said to never lose a battle.
A complete letdown. He didn't pass away in a brave battle or a big fight to the end. Nope. Alexander the Great died from typhoid or malaria or maybe just excessive partying. He was born in 356 BC in Macedonia. His dad, King Philip II, was really smart when it came to the military.
There's so many cool like artistic renditions you can get of Philip, his father. He had this nasty scar on his face because he had been captured by enemies before. He was messed up, I guess, looking. This is a very flattering depiction.
But Alexander wanted more than to just take over the throne. He wanted it all. Alexander received top-notch education.
Aristotle.
All thanks to his private tutor, Aristotle. Yeah, that Aristotle.
Yep.
When he turned 20, his dad was no longer around because he went to the store to get some cigarettes.
No.
Nah, he was assassinated. And Alexander became king.
He was assassinated.
Jumping ahead to 323 BCE, Alexander was in Babylon, just back from another successful mission. He was only 32.
Well, they had, before that, had to retreat. They had gone down in the Indus River Valley and fought the Mauryan dynasty and had been fighting for 10 straight years, and his troops and everybody like, dude, we don't want to fight anymore. So go back to Babylon, one of the major cities they conquered, of course, from Persia. And yep, here we go.
2 years old, but had already accomplished more than what many people could in 10 lifetimes.
Yeah, 32.
He could have celebrated his win, but instead he chose to do what he always did.
Partied.
Keep the fun alive. One night, after a really fun party, as expected, Alexander began to feel kind of sick. At the beginning, people probably just tried to ignore it. He'd faced tougher times, many fights, wounds, tiring walks through the desert. What's a small fever next to that? But this time, the sickness got the best of him. In about 10 days, Alexander got worse. He was in pain, couldn't move, and slowly lost his ability to talk.
Right.
His generals, likely worried about seeing their strong leader turn into a helpless sick dude, kept asking him who should lead the empire next.
Right.
And Alexander, responding in maybe the funniest way he could, said,
all of you,
to the strongest.
Yeah.
Great. Very useful. That won't cause any problems down the line. So what
ends up happening is the three kind of leaders there, Seleucid, Ptolemy, and Tigonid or whatever. I remember the name of their empires, but the people specifically. But yeah, they end up splitting the empire, and essentially it kind of splits up in a way that it was kind of like before he had conquered it, where one's basically going to rule Persia, one's going to rule Egypt, although Egypt was ruled by the Persians then, but always had a separate identity that way, and then Greece itself.
Brought down the guy who could beat armies and handle wild horses. People who study history still debate it. The main ideas are typhoid fever or malaria, both usual and dangerous in ancient Babylon.
It's good because the first historical recollection of this, which is kind of hard because a lot of primary source stuff is not very well documented actually about Alexander's life. But one of the first accounts of his death said that he died of a fever. And that could mean a lot of things. I've heard that alcohol poisoning could be something just because he did drink a lot. Some people say he was induced to one of the theories is that he was, started drinking so much because his best friend, I think his name was, I want to say Hephaestion, I can't remember if I'm pronouncing that right, had died, and that also made him super depressed. So you had that, potential poisonings or something like that. But I mean, relatively healthy dude dying at 32. Yeah, we know diseases are big too. So we don't know. We may never know.
Some stories say Alexander made himself weak by drinking a lot and pushing himself too hard. And when he got sick, his body just couldn't take it anymore. Next, there's the more interesting idea. Poisoning.
Yeah.
Maybe one of his generals or opponents put something in his drink. It's a nice story, but there's a problem with it. Poison back then didn't work very quickly. The slow decline that Alexander went through doesn't really suggest assassination. It shouts way too much wine, not enough taking care of himself.
I don't know how long he was sick for.
According to a cheery new theory, the man wasn't quite dead when everyone started planning his huge farewell tour. He could have just been lying there, fully awake, but unable to move.
What?
Which is somewhat horrifying. No matter what really took place, Alexander the Great,
buried alive,
this amazing person, passed away in a bed in Babylon at only 32 years old. Didn't even reach middle age.
Moving to Alexandria too.
But hey, what a life. Next up is the real OG.
That's another one. We actually don't know where he is buried either, because they think they moved him to Alexandria, right? But then don't they think he was also moved again? Can't remember. All right, Genghis Khan. Here we go.
And Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan, who was named Temujin, I butchered that pronunciation, when he was born in 1162, didn't have a lot of help or special benefits when he began his life. Nope, his first 30 years, a bunch of big mistakes, being let down and feeling left out by his family. Instead of feeling sorry for himself or sharing sad memes and
dad was killed by a rival, mom kidnapped multiple times, I think.
Hey, what if I conquer everything and make history? So that's what he did. By the time he was done, he'd built the biggest connected empire ever. The biggest empire reaching from the Great Wall of China to the Caspian Sea and further.
Sure.
This guy went from
that right there. Empire. Yeah, he didn't conquer all this himself because a lot of it with China, especially below the wall that you can see there, was by his son Kublai. But yeah, his successors pushed it all the way to where you're seeing right here.
Reaching from the Great Wall of China to the Caspian Sea and further. This guy went from living in a tent with his family to owning all of China, Central Asia, and pretty much everywhere else. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Genghis Khan, the man who spent many years fighting, also met his end in a surprisingly dull way. Imagine this. Genghis Khan is out there, doing his thing.
Injured,
taking
right?
over, planning, probably giving pep talks to his army like, you want to win? And then, bang. This guy, who's been through tough times, betrayals, and maybe even dealt with some not-so-great Yelp reviews, falls off his horse. Not just a simple fall, but a serious injury that, according to some stories, left him in bad shape. The next part
never
is a
recovered.
bit unclear. Some people think he was killed because why not make the story more interesting?
Sure.
But we aren't too sure. I mean, it's Genghis Khan. Naturally, some folks say he might have been taken down by a mysterious assassin. It would make for an epic story. Others, they just blame the infection.
I mean, there's plenty of people that would love to see him dead. Made plenty of enemies out on the fringes there. But yeah, I understand too that when you got injured, whether it's a war wound or any kind of injury, before like modern antibiotics and medicine, it was like a death sentence. It was very hard to recover from stuff like that.
Also, nobody knows where his grave is, but the rumors are really weird.
All right, let's hear it.
Like some people say it's on Burkhan Khaldun, where he once hid himself from enemies. Or maybe it's hidden under a forest, covered by trees and horses. Then there's the idea that his grave got the rough treatment, with 1,000 horses walking all over it.
I haven't heard those ones.
Sure. The guy who made history ended up
What about the diverting a river?
He bonked his head on the ground, falling off his pony. Pretty cool, I guess. Anyway, moving on.
But yeah, like I said too, I'd heard about the people knowing about his location being executed, then the people that like knew about that also being executed. Wild.
Napoleon Bonaparte. Whatever. The short, angry French dude. He just kept taking over Europe.
I looked like him.
Of course, Europe finally said they had enough of him. Born in 1769, this man quickly became famous and became the Emperor of France. And yet, he's another addition to our list of people who died in somewhat boring ways.
He did.
He began with simple roots. He was a smart military leader and eventually became the Emperor of France. Sure, there were some bumps along the way, like losing
that was Italy, but
Waterloo. But who hasn't had a tough day?
Although he conquered Italy.
Having one setback in a career filled with wins doesn't really destroy your whole reputation. Unless you're Napoleon. Then it did. After Waterloo, he ended up on a free trip to the island of St. Helena, a lonely rock in the South Atlantic.
The second time he had been exiled. Second time. This time they were, Elba, which was very close to the European coast. He had been exiled before, but now they put him in the middle of the South Atlantic, one of the most remote islands there is under British occupation.
The man who once had power over much of Europe was now spending his days in exile, with only his thoughts, a few island goats, and the rare visitor to keep him company. That's a midlife crisis. But did he handle this exile well?
Guards.
Nope. He was slowly getting sick, and not in an exciting way.
Yeah, the early conditions of him at St. Helena were not good. Definitely bad for his health. They improved later because I think word got out, if I remember right, that those conditions were not very good. You can see his, like the home and stuff they have today, and it's a nice place. But from what I understand, the early days were pretty difficult and very easy to contract, all types of health problems.
This wasn't the end of a great nation. It was just a Frenchman having some tummy troubles. Super fancy. He did
have a stomach problem
with what was probably stomach cancer. He passed away on May 5th, 1821. No sudden escapes, no hidden tricks to make things better, just a gradual slide into sickness and passing away.
For that stomach cancer, I know is a prevailing theory.
But hold on. The story isn't finished yet.
Poison, maybe?
Since Napoleon was such a dramatic figure, he couldn't pass away without sparking some conspiracy theories.
Mm-hmm.
Some folks really wanted to think that Napoleon didn't pass away from stomach cancer like the doctors claimed. They believed he was poisoned with arsenic. Well, stomach cancer just doesn't sound exciting enough for someone as legendary as Napoleon. People said that the British government, still upset about Napoleon's rule, might have played a part in his downfall by secretly poisoning him. Reports say that traces of arsenic were found in his hair, and conspiracy theories quickly began to gather.
I guess that would be the way to have some kind of like plausible deniability, because the idea of, executing monarchs like this was very frowned upon, which is the reason why he was exiled twice. But here they're like, okay, we could kill him, but not have to like look bad doing it. So conspiracy.
Spinning news stories that made Napoleon's death a dramatic murder rather than just a natural result of a rather unhealthy life. Like maybe the guy just had too many croissants. There's a fun little theory that says that he was buried in the Invalides in 1840. The British Empire played a trick by switching his body with that of an ordinary person.
Oh.
And the reason was to throw shade at France, obviously. Nothing says respectful diplomatic relations quite like swapping.
He was buried on St. Helena for a while, but they
ordinary person
repurposed him.
Picture the French showing their respect to him for all this time, only to discover they've been honoring a guy named Jacques from the neighborhood bakery. Now let's talk about another guy.
I'd never heard of the person swapping theory. What's some of the evidence behind that? I know a lot of you guys are big Napoleon guys. I want to hear about that.
Cyrus the Great.
Ooh.
The big one. The dude who said, I'm going to take over all of Persia.
Founder of Persia.
A bit more, just for fun.
Empire, that is.
Cyrus, born in 600 BCE, was like the ancient world superachiever who was really dedicated to his job. He didn't just lounge in fancy places drinking wine. Nah, he was out taking over lands, building empires, and likely making many people regret ever hearing the name Cyrus. After taking
classic
over one
empire building,
another, he built the first Persian Empire. Cyrus ruled over a huge area of about 5.5 million square kilometers.
Yeah. I've heard the term like first superpower. Look at that. Like truly an empire with just that massive we'd not seen before.
Which was the biggest empire during this time. He started by taking down the Median Empire, bringing the Medes and the Persians together. He then beat the Lydian king Croesus, spreading his rule over Anatolia, and took Babylon in 539 BCE, adding Mesopotamia, Syria, and parts of the Levant.
Mm-hmm.
Cyrus also moved east into Central Asia. His empire reached from the Mediterranean Sea
up to India.
This river. But here's the thing about someone who tries really hard. Eventually, you meet someone who doesn't care about being...
I do not know about his death.
Meet the Massagetae and their queen, Tomyris. Cyrus faced someone tough here, and wow, it did not turn out great. Cyrus was just going about his business, conquering and ruling. The usual for him, when he chose to challenge the Massagetae. What does this lead to? Oh, nothing big, just his death. Queen Tomyris, the leader of the Massagetae, wasn't very pleased with his plans to grow his empire. Cyrus, the determined guy he was, thought he could simply defeat her army and continue enjoying his life. But Queen Tomyris, she had different ideas. She wasn't going to let him take over her people and just leave happily. She gathered all her troops, and in a surprising turn of events, she was able to defeat Cyrus's forces. Now Cyrus, who was previously thinking this is surely going to be a win, had to pull back. And what happens when Cyrus retreats? He dies. But not in the grand heroic way. Nope, he dies in a way that feels like we're losing and now he's dead. It's a bit awkward, honestly. There's more. You didn't believe Cyrus would just pass away and that'd be it, did you?
No.
Nope. Queen Tomyris still had more in store for him.
What'd she do?
After he lost, she made sure his death wasn't just a loss, it was a big show. She ordered that his body be mutilated. Tomyris had his head chopped off, put in a wineskin, and filled it with blood.
I did not know this. I mean, I love learning about, learning about the Persian Empire, but his death, I know more about his rule than his death. This is wild. What the heck? The disrespect.
Cyrus had his head chopped off, put in a wineskin, and filled it with blood. Specifically, the blood of her son. It might be a bit over the top, but it's all in the past. People liked being extra back then.
Wow.
Cyrus, this amazing conqueror of empires, the guy who believed nothing could hold him back, he ended up being killed by a wandering tribe and had his head turned into a bloody, strange
crazy.
Because that's history for you.
Dang.
Next up, we got Vladimir.
Oh, that's awesome. but horrifying. All right, was he impaled?
Vladimir the Impaler. Born in 1431.
That's the only fitting death for him.
Wasn't really famous for being charming or diplomatic. Nope, Vlad was the type of leader who liked to be direct. His message was clear. Anyone who went against him should start praying. Vlad was a prince of Wallachia.
Oh, yeah.
And although his habit of killing people made him very scary, it also gave him a reputation as one of the most feared and well-known rulers ever. His love for punishment was so strong that even the Ottoman Empire reached out to him saying, hey, maybe ease up on the impaling.
Yeah.
After many tough fights, broken promises, and a time that scared even the strongest men, Vlad's fortune came to an end. Vlad the Impaler's death is surrounded by mystery and different stories.
Yeah, I don't know about his death.
Making it one of history's more talked about subjects. Most sources say that Vlad died in battle in December 1476 or January 1477, but the details are not clear. There are two main ideas.
Okay.
One points to Ottoman forces, and the other hints at betrayal by his own men. So one idea suggests that Vlad was killed in the...
Everybody hated him. Ottomans being the greats. You know, this is the time of the Ottoman incursion really into Europe. And as they were trying to push, across into the Balkans region and making their way, far up as they can. But they always had to deal with, these type of groups up here. And then eventually you're going to get, they make it all the way up to Vienna, but that's not going to be till about the 1600s. But and then when you're impaling all your enemies too, you make a lot more enemies, both internally and externally. But anything other than him being impaled, I think, is not a fitting ending.
Fight with Ottoman forces close to Bucharest. Back then, Wallachia was a troubled area, stuck between the goals of the Ottoman Empire and the Kingdom of Hungary. Vlad had recently gotten back to the Wallachian throne with help from Hungary, but the situation was shaky. The Ottomans, wanting to take back control of the area, launched a campaign to get rid of him. Vlad's army, much smaller in size, probably encountered Ottoman soldiers in a direct fight. The more interesting and sad idea is that Vlad was turned against and killed by his own people. Vlad's leadership was marked by his harsh actions to keep control and create fear. His use of sharp stakes and other harsh punishments made everyone feel scared and suspicious. In a situation like this, even his friends might have seen him as a risk. Some stories say that in a wild fight or surprise attack, Vlad was taken down by his own soldiers.
Dang.
Either because of personal issues, money from Ottoman agents, or fear of his erratic leadership.
A lot of reasons.
And also, what happened to Vlad's body adds to the mystery. Some sources say that his head was sent to the Ottoman Sultan to show he was dead, while others say his body was burned in a monastery.
You'd think if it was given to the Ottomans would be talking about that a lot, and there'd be a ton of documentation, because that would be something that you would want to tell people about, what happened with your enemy.
But nobody's been able to prove anything. The uncertainty about his death,
we don't know where his body is,
portraying him both as a sad hero and a cruel ruler brought down by the harshness that marked his rule. Next up, we got a conqueror. We got a William.
William. Yeah, I don't know how he died either.
William was born in 1028. He didn't just take over England, he made sure everyone heard about it. In fact, the way he's known as the Conqueror really shows how over the top he was. His story is amazing. Battles, takeovers, and a whole kingdom under his control. But just like all
England up for grabs,
William had one weakness: falling off of horses. Yep, poor guy fell off his pony.
Hey, I can't make fun of that. I feel like if I was someone that rode horses a lot, that I would definitely fall too. And horses are unpredictable, man. I know they can get trained, but like, hey, they're a being with their own brain and personalities. They can buck you off or go fast, make a turn. We can still laugh about it, I guess.
There's a wild theory that says Philip really disliked Richard because he left Philip's sister in an insulting way, and then had the nerve to become king of England. So what went down? In 1087, during the siege of Mantes, William, known for being a strong conqueror, fell off his horse. And no, it wasn't a big fight move or even a strike. He just fell off his horse right in the middle of everything happening. The Great William, the man who took over a whole country, made kingdom surrender, and changed a whole society, died because he couldn't stay on his horse. So what happened after that? A string of really bad things. The fall led to some bad internal injuries. You might assume...
Hey, it's starting to sound a little bit more like, like Genghis Khan, right? It can happen. We're all one horse fall away from our demise.
Someone who survived many years of fighting would be okay. But this was a different kind of injury. It got infected, as expected. And since it's the 11th century, there wasn't really a simple solution for that. Now, William didn't really slip away quietly. He was in pain for weeks, and it said that during this time, he became a bit grumpy.
I bet.
Seriously, like, who wouldn't be? And after a few weeks of pain, William gave in to his injuries. To make things worse, William was buried in a grave that wasn't even respectable. They said his body didn't even fit the tomb right, which is quite a way to end a reign. Next up, Richard the Lionheart.
What? The disrespect. I'm saying this repeatedly from some of these guys. The disrespect. He's your king. The modern England. He's founding it. Oh, Richard Lionheart. All right. This one. Okay. So I was saying that, people, including ourselves, no matter how great you are in history, are one small accident away from dying. And maybe we should lighten up if on those people that's the case. But this one is almost laughable.
Born in 1157, this person had a resume that would make anyone who tries hard feel shy. He wasn't just the king of England. He also traveled a lot through Europe and the Middle East, fighting in battles, taking back holy lands, and building his reputation as one of the coolest kings ever. He was really scary in fights. If Twitter had been around in medieval times, every tweet would have been about Richard doing something really brave, like rushing into a battle or leading his soldiers himself. But as usual, destiny had different ideas. Even the greatest warriors can't avoid the one thing that medieval life often dealt out: an unexpected, somewhat awkward death. So there he was in 1199, doing what he loved most, attacking a castle.
Crusading.
The castle we're talking about is Chalus-Chabrol in France, and Richard was there to get some treasure.
Fighting everybody.
Since being a king doesn't seem to pay well enough. Now, if you're picturing a grand movie-like battle, don't. This felt more like a small argument over shiny objects than a grand adventure of a king. So the battle started. While looking at the castle walls,
they had rifles.
Richard made the smart choice to walk around without his armor on. After so many years of fighting, he thought he was unbeatable. Heads up, he wasn't. A crossbow shooter,
nobody is,
probably a pretty irritated Frenchman, fired a shot, striking Richard in the shoulder.
French love their crossbows.
Here's the surprising part. The bolt wasn't even shot by a skilled knight or soldier. Nope, it came from a random castle guard who probably couldn't believe his luck. And you also might assume that this small injury wouldn't matter much to someone like Richard, who'd been through many fights and adventures.
Dude, imagine how good that guy felt, or whatever, like cocky and arrogant he was, that, again, one of the most famous rulers and warriors, I guess you would say, of that whole era. And your crossbow, and the crossbows, So the French love their crossbows, and we know the English, they have their longbows. Crossbows are easier to use in the sense of like aiming and the skill, but they don't quite have as much. They may not have as much of the distance or like the penetration that a longbow might have. So there is a trade off there. So some dude, just pulling that out, and then I don't know, got the wind pattern right place, right time, plus an element of luck. Dude, that guy was talking mad trash to the rest of them forever.
But oh no, back in medieval times, medicine had a different view.
Yeah.
The cut got infected, and naturally gangrene began to form.
Yep. This is like almost like everybody. If you took an arrow, I know we get in movies where like arrows were just like instant death, like a gunshot wound, certain gunshot wounds, but arrows were not like that. They did not kill you instantly. I mean, I guess you got somehow impaled your skull immediately, but like you were going to die from the infection. There was nothing they could do back then. This is before antibiotics, and it was terrible. Like, an arrow was a death sentence.
This is the part where Richard's story gets unexpectedly nice. Despite being on his deathbed, the Lionheart seemed to have a moment of clarity. He forgave the person who shot him. The King of England, a guy who once led troops far and wide, chose to move on from the past.
Oh my gosh, by the way, I was saying earlier that it was going to be like a funny thing. I totally mixed. I don't know why I mixed him up. I mixed him up with Barbarossa, like of dying while like trying to drink, he drowned, but like trying to like drink water or whatever. I totally mixed him up with Richard the Lionheart. So I'm sorry, I don't have a funny thing to add to this. Although I don't know, I guess I don't know if it was funny again that some random dude was able to hit him with an arrow. Maybe that was.
Some people believe this kind act was Richard's way of finding peace with his past. Others think he was just confused from the illness. In any case, it was unexpectedly nice. But don't worry about the crossbowman. The man was put to death anyway.
Oh, gosh.
Because in medieval times, forgiveness was more about showing you were a truly good person just before your death.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, if you made it to the end, subscribe and click this video here that YouTube thinks you'll like.
All right. Hope you had fun with me. I hope I was able to add to the stories of the deaths of the people I did know, but you're able to learn along with me with the people that I didn't know. And that's going to be fun to be able to share with my students, because I always find that little details like that can be very memorable and get people excited to learn more about history. So, all right. With that, again, if you have not seen it, I'm going to link down below in Kelevin, and Trust Me Bro and Chat History. You do a lot of these great like animated little history blurbs. They're a lot of fun. Those guys competed against each other. I won't tell you to win so you can watch, but it was a lot of fun. These guys are very entertaining. I'm going to link that down below, and we'll see y'all next time.